Welcome. This is Suar from PGstats, hopefully bringing you the information you want to know about the PGRU. Of course, the Panda Global Rankings brought to you by PGstats. Now, if you've been paying attention to Smash Twitter for a while now, you'll know that the PGR is slated to release any second now. And we just wanted to provide a quick video as to how things work, how it's done, why it's done, and most of all, just bring the information to you, the viewer, since we're nothing without you. I just want to thank you all for tuning in. The support means everything, but let's just get right into it since there's quite a lot of it that we have to cover. And of course, season to season, there's just so many questions that people have. So let's get started. First of all, PGstats, who are we? What do we do? We've been in the community now for over 4 years, and it all started with just a couple people interested in creating rankings for the scene. My name is Suar, like I said. I partnered up with Dom from Tri-State, Zan from SoCal, and we pretty much created the first rankings that Smash 4 ever had, and that later became the de facto ranking that then pretty much provided the platform for us to make the PGRU for Smash Ultimate here today. So those guys are amazing, really great work. We come from basically, taking community feedback, trying new things each season, and eventually we got to the point where our team was like 9 people big, and then it shrunk as, people moved on to different projects, life transitions, etc. Now, Practical Tasks, the head honcho behind the algorithm, which of course defines our rankings empirically, is central to the team, and we have a bunch of other people who get involved season to season to help on the project, like Popey, like Mayday, and even recently some very esteemed Redditors and Smash community leaders who of course have helped with article writing and other information gathering and fact checking. So that's a little bit about us. We love doing this every season for the most part because it gives so much to the scene in terms of storylines, so much to the sponsors in terms of cues, who's doing amazing, who's up and coming, and it also just really provides the hype season to season as tournaments like Genesis 7 are gearing up to start, and all these players have insane storylines trailing behind them, and some who maybe people don't even know yet. So going into this season, let's go ahead and get started on that. Season parameters. So of course, this season started July 14th. That weekend began with a bang as Low Tier City 7 pretty much set the tone for the whole season, and it ended in the weekend of December 15th. Both in the same year, 2019, and of course we had that Congo Saga S tier pretty much, bookend the entire season. But what you need to know is that there were 6 S tiers and 13 A tiers. There was a total of 81 events that happened throughout the entire season, of course with the B tiers and C tiers mixed in. All across the globe, we had Japan show heavy representation, mainland US of course, and we also had Canada, Mexico, even Korea at one point pop up on the TTS, which we'll get to in a moment. And so we had a pretty incredible second season. The entire Smash Ultimate community is showing no signs of slowing down. So the international multiplier, let's go ahead and take a look at what it does and what it features within the tournament tier system. And so here we are. The TTS, as we pretty much called it from the beginning, the tournament tier system features a spreadsheet of all the relevant events used for the Panda Global Rankings. Now, for anybody who doesn't know, it is accessible through our Twitter at PGstats, and it pretty much allows everybody to see what's going on. Organizers, players, and even anyone in marketing, or even teams themselves can sort of see what's going on and where. You'll find that the tiers are labeled pretty much to fit the aesthetic of each of the events, with like a lot of the S tiers being a part of those legendary legacy events, and some of the up and coming events that are C and B tier all listed there, all important, all factored in. So features of the TTS. Back in the day, we've had issues that have cropped up between attendance, centrism to USA mainland tournaments, things like that. And so we've started to add features that sort of combat those issues within the Smash competitive scene. Now, for the international multiplier, basically, if you're outside the mainland USA, your tournament gets a boost in its points. Now, the way that tournaments are essentially calculated is one of two. One, by general entrance. If you meet a certain requirement of the specified general entrant count, then your tournament will be a C, B, A, or S tier tournament. The other method that other tournaments get evaluated is through their PGR player concentration. Now, last season, when the tournament tier system was unveiled for now this season, we had all the players that were ranked 1 through 50 pretty much broken up into different categories with their valuations given next to them. So if you have someone from the top 5, let's say, going to your tournament, they're going to be worth a pretty big chunk of points compared to someone in a 30, 40, 50 band. And those players, of course, would pretty much center on the tournaments that were either legacy based, invitation based sometimes if they were, either crowdfunded or asked to come by the event organizer. You know how it is. But for the most part, the really big events had a huge chunk of PGR players as well, like what we saw with EVO and SmashCon. So those players are already there, they bump it up, and the general entrant count is already there, so that's insane. But we take the highest of the two values. So if, for example, you have 1,000 players and just one PGR player in the sea of all those people, pretty much the general entrant count is going to give that tournament its rating. On the other hand, if you have 30 PGR players and 2 people who just join in on the fun and you have a 32-person tournament, it's pretty much going to be rated based on the fact that you have 30 PGR players, which again is not a very common thing because PGR players don't like to get together unless there's something to fight about, aka like a tournament where there's prize money at stake. But I digress. For the most part, the TTS has been instrumental in having tournaments market themselves, and it's something that's also really nifty for people who are trying to plan their season. We'll get into it at the very end regarding the FAQ and some of the tidbits for the TTS. For the most part, what you need to know is that we've been adjusting it every season, and we'll have more to come as season 2 has now started. And we have so many different things that we've learned from not only the first season of Ultimate, but overall just like the 4 years of doing this. I want to say right now that the TTS has been really helpful, only because it's something I look at every day, but it's also something that, we take feedback on. So if you see something on it that needs to be added or changed, let us know in the DMs or just tag us and we'll probably see it anyways and we'll try to fix that. But for now, let's go into the next section, which is now the ranking rationale. And so how does it all work? How are these players placed above each other? How are these players ranked above this person but not that person? Or how are no players that you thought would be on the PGR show up at all? So to answer that question, a couple of things need to be laid out, and that is how and what we look at specifically when we're looking at these brackets and we're looking at these players who have participated within the PGR season. For the most part, it has been very difficult to sort of track attendance in the way where people want certain attendances valued or a minimum entrance needed. So what we've found for the first 2 seasons already is that if players are going to be ranked, they're already attending a lot of tournaments. Attaching a minimum cap or attaching some sort of like must attend XYZ tournament hasn't really worked out to something that we're confident in yet, so that's not anything that we're tracking. All the tournaments that you entered are counted. The highest, the lowest, they're not dropped, they're not added in extra. It is what it is when it comes to attendance. So what we look at: outplacements over everything, as well as wins, head-to-heads, are the things we track. Placements themselves do not hold value for us in a vacuum, in the sense that a first place at a C tier and a first place at an S tier do not mean the same thing. Not only are they evaluated differently because one is literally an S tier and one is literally a C tier, but the fact remains is who you outplaced at that tournament greatly determines the value of that placement. Getting first at an S tier with 1,000 people, like in the example earlier, and only one PGR player means you only outplaced that one PGR player and anybody else that may be of relevance as they gear up during the season. But if those people never end up doing anything that season, you essentially scored a free win that we have no basis to judge over. However, if you get first at a tournament outplacing big names like Nairo, Leo, Tweak, Samsora, that placement has a lot more value. Even if it's a 5th or even a 7th, let's say those players got upset and they're lower in the bracket, something must have happened that tournament that must have caused that. All that and more is calculated within the algorithm. Then more classically speaking, head-to-heads, what the set counts are, that is also taken into account. But again, bear in mind where those happen very much impacts the score of those head-to-heads. You might be 2-2 with someone else, but if 2 of those sets happened at an EVO and 2 of those sets happened at a C tier, who has those 2 sets that came out of EVO, an S tier versus the C tier, is greatly going to determine in whose favor it is. And it's very difficult for us to necessarily show that when we show head-to-heads, but we're trying to do a better job of clarifying on the cards or in general, the data that we present where these tournaments happen. And I think we might have nailed it in this upcoming PGRU presentation for season 1. Now, head-to-heads, outplacements, what does it all mean? Well, again, this is something that it boils down to the algorithm, and the algorithm itself has been something that we've been adjusting as the seasons come and go. Reason being, the needs of the scene change, the scale of the scene changes. When we were approaching the end of Smash 4, before Ultimate came out, tournaments weren't happening as frequently, and for the most part, people weren't competing as frequently. If we kept the same standards that we had then to now, everything would be blown out of proportion because of the fact that right now, many people are competing all over the world all of the time, which we'll get into in the second later with the FAQ. But what I want to really stress right now is that the win strength as well, when people consider what sort of win they got a PGR win, they beat, number 2 up from season 1, all that is calculated at the end. The strength is calculated all at the end. Now you might wonder, what does that mean? I got a win on number 3 from season 1, and now you're telling me it doesn't count as much? Well, not exactly. Here's the thing. Within the season, all the wins, all the set counts, outplacements, they're taken into account, and at the very end, simultaneously, they're all calculated against each other. Meaning that if I'm ranked number 3 in the beginning, right? The rankings come out next week, the week after, I'm ranked number 3. If you beat me in February, I was ranked for something I did from July to December. If you beat me in February and it gets to June and I didn't do anything that season, or I busted out, or I just got straight 65ths, you didn't beat number 3 in the world at that point. You beat someone who was ranked number 3 who then performed that season poorly, and your results, as in effect, gets impacted by that. That isn't to say that you're getting robbed of anything, but for someone who wasn't ranked at all, if you consider Meister, who's a very popular example in the mouths of every top player and media outlet practically in Smash, he very notably was not ranked the first season. But as you saw, he started to kick up as the season continued, and he will very likely, surprise, surprise, be ranked in season, 2. So season 2 is going to be ranked with Meister, and all the things that you did during season 1 to beat him, to do all this other stuff, that's going to matter in the end because he finished so highly. He did things all season to pretty much end up where he was, and people along the way who beat him or got upset by him, etc., are going to be impacted by that. So again, bear that in mind. It's not all these rankings in a vacuum. Whoever starts as number 10 isn't a win on a top 10 player, although it sounds nice for Twitter. For statistical purposes, at the end, everything is pretty much racked up, shuffled again, and then looked at based on the time period, which again, PGR does not care about legacy. So if you were number 1 in the world last season, second season, none of that matters. None of that is taken into consideration. Of course, you could say implicitly tournaments seeded based on that, and then that impacted your bracket, etc., etc. We're not getting into theories right now, but for what we're saying, the PGR does not value legacy. So if you got ranked or you haven't got ranked, you are the same coming in as anybody else, and there's no special treatment given. So now, the FAQ. As it stands, the PGR is, of course, a pretty big deal when it comes to controversies, both in and out. People critique it, or people critique things that come out of it, and or they just wanted to learn more. And for the most part, the reception's been pretty positive, and I think the negative reception, speaking as a director, is warranted because there are many parts of it to understand that we either haven't explained all in one place, consistently, or coherently. So here's hopefully point to sort of shed some light. And if you've tuned into Smash Center before, a podcast hosted by myself and Coney, world-renowned PokeTuber, Death Stranding streamer and commentator, then you'd know that we've had these discussions before, but those are informal, more laid back, and on a podcast. So if you haven't tuned into that, no fault to you. Here are the biggest questions asked to us every season. So first one, top 100, why don't you do them? Why do you hate us? Well, we'll be honest with you, Melee does do top 100 and also top 50, and we also do Melee, so we're kind of doing both at the same time. But for what's coming out right now, here at the beginning of January, the Melee one, the MPGR, features an entire year's worth of data, and thus the 100, top 100 ranking that they're releasing. That requires the balloting and the panel and all that to look over the year's data to create their top 100. We've maintained that we're biannual, so twice a year, and so that involves pretty much breaking every like 5, 6, sometimes 7 months because of like the weird timing period with tournaments. And so in doing that, we have like half a year to look at. And yes, there are many tournaments that happen because the frequency is high because Ultimate is a new game, but also keep in mind interactions haven't happened as much as you would like for an actual veritable accurate ranking to be given past the top 50. And again, if you recall, Area 51, no one's really distinguishable in that band, and they're all, you know, hereby referred to as 51st. So top 100, we did a top 100 all time for Smash 4 as kind of a love letter send off sort of thing. It was received moderately well, but also Ultimate came out, so Smash 4 got ejected from the disc, and then we got these little Smash Switch chips that we put in, or just downloaded it. But again, we're thinking about top 100, we're talking about top 50, we keep it top 50, and also the person power too. The melee portion is balloted, thereby by panel, thereby subjective, meaning all these people are giving their opinions based on this subset of data that they're given, you know, through Smash Wiki, through Smash Data, through whatever it is. But this approach that we have with the PGRU is all input based. So we have to put all the different brackets, check for all the different DQs, look for all the different like reporting issues that have happened, which by the way, you'd be surprised to know some tournaments don't report who finishes, or some tournaments put things as DQs when they were wins, or wins when they were DQ'd. The whole thing is pretty insane when it comes to combing for errors. So I can't imagine what looking at a year's worth of tournaments would be for a top 100, let alone being confident in releasing that to the public, considering everything I just said, and also the fact that it's a longer time as well. And I think that Smash Ultimate, and everyone can agree, I think, like benefits from like the constant like updating of like who's the best, who's, you know, who's becoming better. So for the time being, top 50 is the way to go, plus Area 51. Next question. US bias, that's a very popular one, considering the fact that we are based in the United States. One would think, oh, they really like America. Actually, not true. That's not, well, not that part's not true, but competitive Smash is US centralized. So the rankings thereby created for competitive Smash globally tend to be skewed towards American events. Now, what do we do about that? Well, like I stated earlier, the international multiplier was our attempt to sort of not even the scales, but to sort of put international events on the map and give them a sort of leverage to be able to rank not even accurately, but at all. So, of course, the accuracy falls in line with the fact that it's a very minor, mild multiplier. It's not like a 3.0 multiplier that these international events are getting, but at the same time, you're seeing more and more representation, not only because people are aware of this, but also because the first year of Ultimate gave a lot of interest to the international scene. Many people saw the circuit that happened in Europe. Many people are seeing the different, you know, international crossovers that we're getting from Canada to US, Mexico to US, and then of course Japan, and all the events that have happened there. So with Nintendo, without Nintendo, there's been a lot of buzz, and so US bias, we're trying to combat it, but at the same time, we have to realize that we cannot play necessarily God to situations in which people want these smaller events to be ranked, but they either don't have the necessary points that we set based on general entrant count or PGR player concentration, or they don't travel to those events. And the fact that Evo, CEO, Genesis, SmashCon, all those big S tiers that we've seen in the past happen here is not something we can control. If it was up to us, we would have all those events I just named happening in a different country, in a different point around the world. But the fact is, that's not up to us. So in order to combat that sort of centralization, we try to cast the net as far as we can. We have general entrant counts that are pretty generous, considering the fact that this is like pretty much the pathway to get ranked. So if you hit those, you know, 120, 130 or so people that you need to get a tournament, it is factored in. Whether or not that has an impact on the top 50 is a different story, based on the fact that whoever wins that C tier would have to eventually win bigger things to even register to the system, is really something that just scenes themselves have to work on. But to say that we focus just on the US and the US only is incorrect, because we don't. We cast the net wide, we put the multiplier out, we coordinate with TOs, for example in Japan, to get the latest in their information, track for DQs, and we put all that information out in the TTS, and we pretty much track like what's going on in Global Smash every season, as much and as best as we can. So if you think your scene is neglected, please get in contact with us so we can make sure that your scene is seen. Like I said earlier, South Korea had an event show up in the TTS, so again, anything's possible. You just have to let us know, and we'll have to be looking, because again, there's a lot to look for. So it's our fault, it's your fault, it's our fault, but yeah, we'll take responsibility for that. If your scene doesn't show up and it should have, let us know. Again, comment, DM, etc. Yeah, so that about wraps it up for the FAQ. Hopefully that answered the biggest points of contention that you might have had or heard. This has been pretty good, I think, to sort of open up and talk about what it is that we do and how we do it. I do want to say that for what it's worth, each season is surprising, and what defines each season in terms of events and players and storylines is not up to us. It's up to the players themselves and the fans that follow them and the tournaments that host them. So if nothing else, remember, there's always next season, and we make the changes to sort of make sure that everybody can get what they need out of the rankings, whether it's, the accuracy, whether it's, the hype buildup, etc. So on the production side, we thank you. On the team side, we thank you. And, for myself, like as director, thanks for supporting. Thanks for watching. If you've seen these points as something that, you want to talk about with whoever, feel free to link the video. Feel free to clip it, whatever. Spread it, spread the message. And if you have any other questions, let us know in the comments down below. We'll try our best at answering them. And if anything, this gets posted to Reddit and we'll have a conversation there. So this has been Suar from PGstats. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you learned something. Or maybe you didn't, and this was all something you already knew but needed clarification. In either case, thank you, and we'll be seeing you as the reveal begins and as top 10's revealed. So see you next time, and goodbye.